Ghosted, super expensive abandoned mansions you never thought existed. Empty and unloved, some of the world's priciest properties have been forsaken by their owners and left to languish. When they were built, these lavish homes were likely worth today's equivalent of millions of dollars. Now, they're falling apart. From a White House replica on top of a skyscraper to a castle with a dark history, here are some of the biggest and super abandoned mansions around the world that cost millions to build but are now considered money pits. But before we get into all that, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel. Casas Perimentale. As far back as the 18th century, people have been fascinated with ruins as picturesque compositions. But our collective obsession with the shells of forgotten architecture is not limited to quaint abbeys, rundown warehouses, and rural cottages. Casas Perimentale is an extraordinary built experiment, one that challenged the understanding of what architecture is and how it's created. With novel construction techniques and an unorthodox design method, a family of Italian architects created an extraordinary elevated house, a concrete treehouse. It is a wild, eclectic ode to brutalism that is slowly crumbling away on a wooded plot near the coast. The architect built the house in the late 1960s as a way to explore ideas pertaining to form and space at a 1:1 scale. Perugini passed away in 1995, and for the past 20 years, the house has been left to deteriorate, steadily overwhelmed by plant life and vandalized with graffiti. Each generation marks it, which shows the sheer endurance the treehouse had to go through. Linwood Hall. When you look at this mansion, all you can think is, ooh, how the mighty have fallen. To say Linwood Hall is massive would be a massive understatement. Indeed, it's the 12th largest historic house in the US. Linwood Hall is a 110-room, century-old Gilded Age palace just outside of Philadelphia, and was designed by Horace Trumbauer in the late 1890s. It once held the most important private art collection of European masterpieces in the country. It was built in 1900 for Peter Arrow Brown Widener, a businessman who became wealthy from investing in public transit and meatpacking, among other things. He had 3 sons, one of whom died on the Titanic, and lived in the house until he passed in 1915. His son Joseph inherited the mansion and lived there until he died in 1943. No surviving members of his family, even his children, wanted to take on the responsibility of the place. By 1945, Widener's estate was valued at $98 million. It's believed Widener had this home built for his wife. It cost an estimated $200 million to build in today's dollars. Although it's still in relatively good condition, it could cost up to $40 million to restore the hall and its grounds to their former glory. White House knockoff. Okay, this might just win the record for the most insane house in the world. Bangalore may contain some of India's most luxurious mansions, but this one could top them all, literally. Vijay Mallya, chairman of the United Breweries Group, wanted his very own White House replica, and by 2016, his penthouse atop Kingfisher Tower in the heart of Bangalore City was nearly finished. Unfortunately, financial woes and money laundering charges made him flee to the UK, leaving his mansion unfinished. It's still located on the 33rd and 34th floors of the Kingfisher Tower, and his Sky Mansion spans 40,000 square meters. The completed home was supposed to have a wine cellar, a heated indoor pool, outdoor infinity pool, gym, salon and spa, helipad, and many more luxuries. It cost $20 million to build. Developer Prestige Estates said the exterior is just about complete, but interior work has yet to begin. To think that a house like this actually exists, I have no words. Why would anyone want such a thing? It's hard to understand what goes on in the minds of millionaires. Neverland Ranch. Nearly everyone has heard of Michael Jackson's famous home in California, Neverland Ranch. If you haven't, it's a massive property that contains his own amusement park. The mansion on the property has 6 bedrooms, and he even had his own zoo. There is a Peter Pan theme throughout the home, and Jackson claimed that he created the children's paradise because he never wanted to grow up. Considering his story, that doesn't sound right. In 2003, Michael Jackson was charged with child abuse, and he was accused of using Neverland Ranch to lure in these kids. After the police searched his property, they couldn't find any evidence, so he was acquitted. However, the situation made Jackson feel violated, so he decided to leave the property and never live in it again. In 2006, he fired all of the staff who were maintaining the house. He died in 2009, and the house remained abandoned until 2015. When the house first went on the market, the Jackson estate was asking an insane amount of $100 million. Not surprisingly, no one wanted to buy it. 5 years later, a billionaire named Ron Burkle purchased the home for $22 million because he wanted to develop the land. Lennox Castle. Hidden away in a secluded rural spot north of Glasgow, Lennox Castle is an abandoned building with a very interesting history. So, if you're a screenwriter who's interested in writing scary stuff, you better take notes. Lennox Castle in Scotland was built in 1812 for John Lennox Kincaid Lennox. He was supposedly a distant relative of the clan Kincaid, who were descendants of some of the notable ancient earls of Lennox. Long story short, the castle was home to an important Scottish family, until it was converted into an asylum for the mentally ill in the 1930s. The hospital reached a peak in the 1970s, when around 1,700 patients were housed there. By that time, conditions were beginning to deteriorate as there were not enough staff or funding for so many patients. Fights among the patients were common, and in one particularly bad fight, much of the staff ran from the hospital. First vacated in the 1980s, Lennox Castle Hospital was eventually closed down in 2002, leaving the institution's sad and difficult history to be forgotten, just like its crumbling, abandoned former home. Swananova Mansion. Way back in 1912, a businessman named Major James H. Dooley spent $2 million to create an Italian Renaissance revival mansion. Located in Lyndhurst, Virginia, this home was one of a kind, and it took over 8 years to complete. There are marble floors, custom-made Tiffany windows, and many other features carefully crafted by 300 different artisans. Major Dooley named the mansion Swananova, and it became the jewel of the entire town. All this luxury came to a halt, however, when Major Dooley died in 1924, and his wife died just 2 years later in 1926. The Dooleys didn't have any children, so it was passed on to James's two sisters. They sold it for just $300,000 to someone who wanted to convert it into a country club. Imagine that! The club opened in 1929, but had to shut down in 1932 because it lost so much money during the Great Depression. The US Navy considered buying this mansion as a place to house their troops during World War II, but the repair costs would have been too massive. So, it was purchased in 1944 for $60,000 by a man named Walter Russell. He planned to create a New Age university on the grounds, but it never happened. Since then, it has been considered a money pit to anyone who dares to buy. Sunninghill Park Estate. The dilapidated mansion is the last symbol of Prince Andrew's failed marriage to Sarah Ferguson and has been left in decay 7 years after the prince sold it for $17 million. To make matters worse, the Grand Country Club, gifted by the Queen to her second son as a wedding gift, is now under the Heathrow flight path, where planes pass over it every few minutes. The 12-bedroom Sunninghill Park in Berkshire, which is only around 30 years old, is a shadow of its former splendor and has now broken windows and boarded-up entrances. The Duchess of York lived on there with daughters Beatrice and Eugenie following the divorce in 1996, but moved out in 2006 and joined Andrew at his home Royal Lodge in Windsor Great Park. Dubbed South York because it resembles South Fork, the ranch house in TV's Dallas, the Duke of York sold it to Kazakh businessman Timur Kulibayev in 2007. It was then razed to the ground with plans to start afresh. Now, 5 years on, its replacement building is nearing completion, and it has been souped up with all the mod cons, from a gym with steam, ice, and sauna rooms to a spacious library. Which one of these places would you want to move into? Let us know in the comments. And if you enjoyed the video, don't forget to like it and share it with your friends. Subscribe to our channel for more amazing content, and we'll see you in the next one. Keep it cool.